This podcast is for general information only. It is not intended as a substitute for general healthcare services. If you have medical conditions, you need to see your doctor. Use of this information is at the user's own risk. Welcome to FitRx with Dr. Greg Dennis. Join me as we challenge the standard sick model of healthcare. This is your source for everything health, wellness, prevention, fitness, biohacking, and more. So before we get started on the podcast, I talked to you last week that I am now using Butcherbox, which is a monthly service where they send you good quality meats every month. And this could consist of grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish, good quality chicken, just whatever you choose, and you can switch it up each month. I got my box in, and even though I haven't made any yet, it looks absolutely delicious. And if you order now using my code, which will be in the show description, you will get a free turkey for the upcoming holidays. It's a $40 value, so just look for that link in the show description, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of FitRx. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Dennis, and I'm very excited to be interviewing my guest today, Dr. Benjamen Morrell, MD. So, as you know, listening to my podcast, I always like just visiting with like-minded people, especially like-minded physicians, and I always get even more excited when I find specialists who really practice more integrative type medicine and have gotten away from the standard, you've heard me call it the quote sick model of healthcare. And, specialists who really practice this kind of medicine, they're few and far between, and especially in psychiatry. And so Dr. Morrell is a psychiatrist who practices integrative medicine and has an integrative clinic. And so we're going to visit with him today just about what he does. And, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but for me as a primary care physician, psychiatry has always been one of those, frustrating fields to refer to because they just, they come back on a sack full of medicine, just immediately get placed on medication, and, don't even talk about, anything else. And when my patients come back to me, they're like, yeah, the doctor spent, 2 minutes with me and just said, here, take this medication. And so it's always been one of those frustrating things. So very excited to know this guy, and he's a local. He's in Oklahoma. And so just excited to visit with him. So Dr. Morrell, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And I can agree with what you're saying there. That was the frustrations I had in my own field, was just seeing the heavy medication burden and polypharmacy, and everybody gets a 10, 15-minute interview, half-hour interview that's, kind of cold and quick, and to leave with 2 or 3 pills that sometimes, but rarely work, but more often cause a lot of problems for them and doesn't actually solve the core of the issue. And I got fed up with that pretty quickly. Even in residency training, mine was during the whole COVID pandemic. So to be able to experience it at that level, going down to that particular time, certainly woke me up rapidly to what was going on, people profiting on, certain situations and in my line of work, the way I go about it is I genuinely care. So I'm not a fan of that particular approach. So I didn't get along very well with that strategy, and to set out and try to solve it has been the mission here, and it's going pretty well so far.
Yeah. Well, talk a little bit more about that, if you will, because most physicians, and I don't really understand this now being kind of on the other side of it, but most physicians and especially specialists seem to be the worst, but they'll go their whole career and like not even question what they're doing. I mean, they're, it's almost just like they've got the blinders on. And I was fortunate. I mean, my listeners have heard my story before, but I was fortunate to just realize after a while, and I used to practice like that, but I was fortunate to just be like, what I'm doing isn't working. And I kind of took a step back, but most physicians don't. I mean, they just don't ever realize that. So talk us through, it sounds like you realized that early on, which good for you, but
Yeah.
talk more about that. Like, how did you realize that so early on? And then, talk about, I guess, that kind of evolution for you,
Sure.
getting to
Yeah.
where
So
you
I
are
would say,
today. So,
so first things first is I was my first patient. I had PTSD. I watched my little brother get hit by a truck twice when I was 5 years old, ran over, backed over, and that was one of the many things I had seen growing up with 10 brothers and sisters in rural Oklahoma. So obviously, like the nature of, anxiety, fears of being around people, questioning God, questioning reality, dissociation, looks like ADHD, struggling in school, and then your standard Oklahoma health. So struggling with overeating and impulsivity. So it's a pretty rough go there. What saved me was purpose on the front end. When I never really cared, to be honest, about anything until I was around 18 years old, and that moment that I was like, okay, yeah, I can keep walking this path and I already know where it's going. Looks like a trailer park and some meth, or we can go this other direction. And ultimately, it was my little brother who ended up living. And he's mentally and physically handicapped, has the IQ of about a 2-year-old, special needs, but absolutely beautiful human being. The light shines through Greg. And I grew up playing with him, taking care of him. So and at the end of my like 18 years old or so, I looked at my life and I really feeling like nothing matters. Who cares? And I saw my little brother on the end of the couch playing. I said, Benjamin, you could say nothing matters, but you can't say that doesn't matter. Can't do that. And in that moment, I said, well, I just want to give that back to the world. To give to the world what those doctors gave to my little brother was a second chance at life. So on the front end, that was all that I needed, because for the first time in my life, anybody who has PTSD or grew up with trauma, uh, or depression, they'll tell you like you just don't feel a lot of positive emotions. And when it finally clicked online for me, I had something to give or to work for, and I didn't even really care about myself. And I feel like to go through medical school, you kind of have a little bit of reckless abandon and not care about your own health too much. But yeah, so obviously going through that my own self, and then healing myself going through college and then medical school. And in medical school, that's when the purpose was there, but the literal stresses were so high. Like I'm talking body's exhausted, waking up at 3, studying, just putting in crazy hours. And I was going through a lot of family situations. Somebody near and dear to me was, on fentanyl and meth, and I was trying to rehab them. It was a brutal experience. And at that point in time, I finally got broken enough for me to at least ask, is this even a real thing? What do I do about it? When I did that, is like the second, third year med school, I began using my skills and just looking online at research and data. And I stumbled across neuroscience and how the brain can change shape and structure and function through time, given new practices, new beliefs, new approaches. And then, so I looked at that sort of the holistic or integrative, or how can I do this naturally approach? What have people been doing for thousands of years approach versus I'm just going to go this route and most likely get some shitty therapy and some Prozac. So that was this way. I saw side effects that were I wasn't trying to deal with, and I was not comfortable sitting down and talking to somebody about my problems. My dad's an old Native American dude. Like you talked about you cry, you get slapped, right? I'm not gonna go talk to somebody, and this is frequently the issue with men, or anybody who has been through that kind of thing, is they don't feel comfortable talking about it. So, anyways, I dove into all the natural practices and just absolutely fell in love with them, and I watched the most heroic shift that I've ever experienced in a person that was me. My mood improved, my energy improved, confidence, my body got better, all these weird aches and pains went away and got improved. And from there, I went from bottom 25% in medical school on board on the first round of boards to the top 25% on the second round of boards. And I barely even studied. My whole life I've been working so hard, looking through the lens of PTSD and a dysregulated nervous system. Then when I finally fixed it and like optimized it, my life just absolutely took off. And with that came this just flood of like, I have to give this back. I just got to give it back. So naturally, I chose psychiatry after that, thinking that this is what we would be doing. And then, unfortunately, when I got there, that was not what we were doing at all. And that bothered me. I tried to help as much as I could. But during the whole COVID thing, I was on the front lines in the whole experience, waiting, people in the ER coming in, just cut their wrist, just cut their neck, or overdose, assault, rape, or whatever. I got to be the one that's taking those to the face and just try to inspire life back into them. Who you would talk about motivational speeches at 3 a.m. deep in the underground of the ER for years, pretty much it seemed like. And those conversations, they were echoing back in my own mind, and then, okay, if I keep going this path, then this is what this looks like forever. Not happening. So it was at that moment I actually decided to surrender board certification. And I was like, I genuinely think I can do better on my own. So, I have my medical license. I still trained in psychiatry. I'm going to figure it out. So then I started my own practice and self-educated myself on all these practices and processes in functional medicine and integrative psychiatry, and then put a practice together where I can actually serve people to help what is going on with them from the inside out. And that has been just an absolute joy, brother.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And gosh, I wish everybody, especially specialists, thought like that. And I really feel like that's the way that our training should go in residency, rather than the other way. And unfortunately, everybody knows that it does not. But what was that experience like for you? You're a little bit unusual. In most of the physicians that I talk to are kind of more like me, is they get the veil lifted from their eyes kind of later in their career, past
Right.
past residency. That happened for you pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was that like going through a more traditional psychiatric residency, and because you have faculty and you have peers that just obviously don't think like you? And I mean, what was that like?
It was bad. Obviously, you're the black sheep. So once again, I had experienced a lot of things that these people had not experienced. So you have a lot of these people that are in psychiatry because it's cushy, because it's in vogue, because it's popular, versus me. My path was through the darkness. So we had two completely different thought processes going through. They couldn't really resonate with the patients or understand them, and I absolutely could. So I genuinely cared way more than, and they didn't care. They're checking the boxes to make sure that they get the credentials so that they can generally go on their vacations or whatever and have a successful practice and some status. And that's just not what I was about. I'm small town guy.
Yeah.
So I tried to, walk like a duck, quack like a duck, but it just got to a point in time where I was like, that's just not what we do, baby. That's just not
Yeah.
what we do. I'm preaching authenticity to my patients. So like if I was to be a sellout as a psychiatrist, or to be depressed or anxious or burned out as a psychiatrist, that's like going to a weight loss doctor or a life coach that's obese and has a terrible life, right? So there's a thing called hypocrisy that I refused early in my career, that if I feel myself talking something that I'm not doing in my own personal life, then I had better check it and get that corrected.
Oh, good for you. So you started this clinic. You have a clinic in Oklahoma City called the LIT Clinic, which stands for Lifestyle Integrative Therapy Clinic. And so I want to go through some of the things you do. On one of the very first things is psychotherapy and somatic therapy, and next to that you have a picture of a sauna. And so my listeners will know, you're just with a picture of a sauna, you're a man after my own heart. I love I love the sauna.
Right.
But talk about just kind of what you do with that, with just somatic therapy, as far as how that can improve mental health.
Sure. Well, let's start from the top here. So somatic means, body. And for me, the brain is not somehow separate from the rest of your body, which is the other reason I did not like, I struggle with being a specialist. The reason I let that path go early was, I looked into the literature. Specialists, what you're more likely to get famous. So people buy into it because it's going to get you some cred. It's going to get you some status by doing a specialty. However, they're terrible at predicting not just the direction of their own field, but also the directions of the other fields around them. And that's because their vision is so narrowed onto this one thing where it's all being funneled into this. So then we're blind to the rest of the world, and you can't account for all the factors. So I saw that early in my career, and I saw myself going down that path. And I was like, if I want to serve the most people, then I have to get off of this road and start getting into these other practices, get a bigger scope of what it means to be human. And when I did that, very quickly, I realized doing psychotherapy, there's no point in me talking to somebody if they have severe back pain, they didn't sleep right, they ate a gas station burrito and drank a Red Bull, and they just got into a fight with their old lady, and they have a and they're right. That person just they're so dysregulated. There nothing is going to be comprehensible coming out that I can even work with. So what I came up with was the PIE system: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. These are the 4 ways that we are trying to shift your state into a better one. So if you're in a bad state of being, if we can do something for your physical body, such as somatic therapy. And once again, I was my first patient. I realized this. I'd be having a terrible day. Like, I'm talking rough. And then I would go foam roll and catch a workout and literally just heroically turn around what I thought was on the way to a depressive episode. And now I'm feeling way better. Same thing I found for practices such as journaling, where I would write my thoughts out and get a plan together because I was so disorganized. Whenever I wrote, my brain would get itself in sync and we were on a plan, and I would feel better, have a little bit of vision. I play music. I play guitar. That's what saved me in college, to be honest. And then also Native American flutes. Before I play those, I can feel everything once again. And then spiritual, which was a new one for me. I was a pretty stout atheist during the med school days, which was probably part of my problems, but have since made my way back to some good old Christianity and spirituality, merged with like a lot of neuroscience, of course. But essentially, so if we can take somebody and run them through this filter, right? So they come into my practice, right? And I'm thinking, how can I solve this person's problems? Is if I had no medications, if I didn't have Xanax, if I didn't have any of these things, what can I do for this person? And I've watched this happen where they come in looking like I'm talking shit. I'm talking tired, they're fatigued, they're beaten up, they're abused. We'll have a great conversation, motivated, purpose driven on why should they even be alive. They will do sauna with, with therapy in the sauna. So psychotherapy with good music, cold plunge, sauna, cold plunge. We'll go back and forth in a contrast therapy. This is an extreme example for those of you who are listening. I would not do this for everybody. We would start at different levels depending on where you're at. But for those particular cases, and when we're done with that, I can just see this magnificent release in this patient, and the truth will come out. They'll shed a couple tears and they'll know exactly what to do, and they're right back on path. So that to me is a way that we can access all those different levels. We hit the body level, we organize the plan for them, we get them some level of win emotionally, and we reground them to their purpose spiritually. And with that, I've seen just heroic transformations, not just in their lives, but in mine, man.
Wow. So are you doing this along with the patient, getting in the sauna and getting in the cold pool with them? Wow.
We in it together, baby. We in it together.
That's that, man. I've never heard of a provider, and I preach a lot of that kind of stuff, but actually doing it with the patient, that's a whole new level. So, I do. My listeners know I do cold pool. I have a pool, in my backyard, and so in the wintertime, I keep it going all year. So in the wintertime, I get in it, but it's difficult. Like, it took me several years to be able to do that, fairly regularly. So how are you able to get a patient who maybe has no experience in this to do that sort of thing?
Right. So, the definition of greatness is to inspire greatness in another person, for me. So like, a lot of this is, you can do it. Right. And, the greatest prison is the one where we can't see the bars. And for a lot of these people who have mental health issues, they're in their own prison that they have created with these prior thoughts or beliefs. And it's simply just not true. So part of me being good at what I do is inspiring people to see what they're truly capable of and pushing them a little bit outside of their limits. Of course, you want to start low and slow, but generally speaking, when you present to them their purpose, and you really, really detail out their motivation on how to be better, and then I explain to them like, hey, this right here is something very, very hard. This is very hard, but that's the point of it, is that it's very hard. And that if you do this will make everything else in your life very easy, or much easier, rather. So if you can drive the right motivational systems, then you get somebody to do something very hard that they didn't think that they could do. Then all of a sudden they have all this confidence, and they get that huge boost and that rush, and they can go attack the things that they're afraid of on their day-to-day. So I've had, probably a 60-year-old lady, for example, who is really bouncing back from a lot of trauma, a lot of fears, doesn't believe in herself, afraid of everything. And then just at the end of this, do some deep breathing, get them all charged up, and she jumps in the cold plunge, and just absolute feeling the sensations of victory. And you can feel like she's finally tapping into that sensation of conquering, of doing difficult things, which is part of being a human. And we want that. We want that. This weird coddled, comfortable life is exclusively modern era, right? Which is part of the reason that people are so sick.
Hmm.
So like I said, part of that is just getting people inspired. And mind you, I'm not like peer pressuring or forcing anybody to do it. It's exclusively voluntarily. And you have to sign a waiver.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. So, I've read it before. It's been a while, but I vaguely remember, the cold plunge when you stay in the cold pool, it increases norepinephrine by like 300%. I mean, I'm sure you know all that.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
is
yeah.
that correct?
For sure. Dopamine 250. So it's like doing a line of cocaine, 250% boost in dopamine. It's about the same as cocaine. So think about this in terms of state control. The state is going to dictate your thoughts, beliefs, and actions. So the person comes in and they're in a terrible state of being. They're depressed, they're downtrodden, they're exhausted, they have no wins. So if I can transform that state, right? So the word repent means to renew your mind, renew your spirit, right? So like to renew your spirit, like you're old and crusty and that got to go. So we got to plug something new into the system. And by doing this, you get them that surge of dopamine that gives them a little bit of clarity, that pushes them outside of that prison that is their own mind so they can see what's going on. You cannot read the label on the cookie jar when you are in the cookie jar of emotion.
Hmm.
These people are in the cookie jar of depression, trauma, anxiety, and it is my job to crack that cookie jar so they can see what's going on, even just briefly, brother, so that then they can do the math on, okay, what does it make sure I don't find myself back into these situations, or take one step, the smallest step that would actually make this better in the future now. Yeah.
Wow. That's good stuff. Well, the next thing you do is something called ketamine assisted therapy. And I have heard of some people using ketamine. This is not my wheelhouse at all. So you'll
Sure.
be teaching me something on this. But I really have nothing to add. So, but tell us, what is ketamine assisted therapy? Who is it good for? Just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, in general, ketamine has been an excellent medication since the 70s, very well tolerated, and not a lot of risk profile, which is the most important thing that I'm looking at. Also, ketamine is a naturally occurring molecule. So that's the other thing that generally makes me feel a little bit better about things. Although it is synthesized. It did take a bad rap, as do most psychedelics on the front end, such as like, we don't know what this does, we don't know why it works. So some providers are very afraid of it because we don't really know why it does what it does. And then of course during the 70s and 80s there was the whole or 60s rather, the psychedelic wave, mushrooms and such. So it kind of gets lumped into that category, unfortunately. Uh, Ketamine was different in that it was already proven in the medical world to be highly valuable for surgery. So it kind of snuck past everything else because they were only using it for those surgeries as an anesthetic. However, so many people were bouncing back coming out of surgery feeling way better from their depression, actually, and their mental health. And they're like, well, what? Okay. People saw that a couple of times. Like, oh, it must be the ketamine. So they isolated that, started studying it in the 2000s, and saw that it can actually be incredible for immediate remission of depression and anxiety for a lot of people. And more studies have been coming out and coming out and coming out since then. However, big pharmaceutical companies, there's just not really money to be made because the patent has expired.
Sure.
So that's why, for example, S-ketamine, or the nasal one that you'll see, Spravato. You familiar with that one?
Not really, huh?
Sure. So there's an intranasal ketamine that induces some of that effect, but very low dose.
Okay.
So what we do know is that this molecule in higher doses can be used as an anesthetic, and then it very much calms the body. However, it stimulates the brain. So even though people's bodies are calm, their brain is very, very active. And that seems to be very curative because the brain can go through different, images or sort itself out. And then later on, we discovered that this is actually causing a boost in brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF.
Mhm.
So that causes neurogenesis. So we're creating more neurons, and then also synaptogenesis, and that those individual neurons are then putting out and shooting out spindles, and so they can communicate and cross communicate to other things within the brain. So we're getting more and then more. So it's like miracle grow that we're throwing onto the brain and the nervous system. When we pair that with the appropriate conversation, and I'll usually do breathing techniques, meditation, or prayer for my patients, designed to target what they're trying to work through, whether that be building their confidence, trying to experience love for the first time, or overcoming some weird life transition or death of a loved one. And that has had monumental shifts in people. Like, say, for example, I've had someone come in suicidal and great person, great, family leader, all of that. Just sometimes you get got, a couple times by life. And then 90 minutes later is completely reversed that. He's like, I don't know what I was going through, but thank God for that. Right. Or thank you for that rather. And that's an extreme example. So that would be like a high dose session, which isn't too bad. Takes about, an hour long or whatever it may be. 45 to 75 minutes is going to be the average. And then I'm usually guiding the front end, and then we'll have a conversation afterwards about what they experienced. In general, it's a lot more positive with ketamine than it would be with psilocybin. So bad trips, while they do happen, aren't going to be quite as prevalent.
Someone with more of a chronic anxiety, depression, whatever, that say has been resistant to other therapies. I mean, is this something they have to do periodically? Like how many treatments do they normally have to do for something
Sure.
like that?
So there's a bunch of different protocols that we can run on
Okay.
this. There's even a low dose protocol. Some people do not like the trip experience, and I don't blame them. If you have a whole lifelong of trauma that you haven't been working through and never experienced before, then generally you don't want to do a psychedelic or heroic dose of any of these things. And that to me makes sense. I totally respect that. They do have low dose protocols where it's 25 to 50 milligrams that you would take sublingual, let it dissolve. You could do that nightly, every other nightly, or every third night. So that would be like I said, that low dose protocol that we can use to get that consistent benefit, and then a consistent increase in brain drive neurotrophic factor through time. So we're getting a little bit more of that relaxing effect. Generally, people have a better improvement with mood. Oftentimes, they get a little bit better sleep as well because you do it before bed. So I've had a lot of good results with that. There's some great data coming out of Colorado for that. Once again, there's not going to be big studies that are pushing this because there's not financially a reason to be doing it. So a lot of it is, one-off providers and professionals that are doing it within their own clinics. So I've been doing that for people for the past probably about a year, and I've been having great results. So
Mhm.
usually I'll do low dose ketamine for a while and then taper them off of their other medications. If they're on an antidepressant or SSRI, I'll pull them slowly off of those while we do the low dose ketamine. And then ketamine doesn't really have a withdrawal symptoms like you would
Mhm.
with brain zaps and such when you come off of the antidepressants. So I use that as a placeholder, and then you can come off of the ketamine clean. So that's been very, very potent.
Uh, Next, you have adventure therapy. So talk a little bit about that you do with patients.
Sure. So at some point in time, you have to stop talking about it and start doing it. And, I certainly pride myself on being a representative for what life is supposed to look like, can't be a hypocrite. I don't want some boring psychiatrist or someone talking to me about life or talking to me about adventure, and then they're not doing anything. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So taking people on retreats, taking people on trips. Last time around, we did a snowboard and ski trip up into the mountains. So we got a big cabin for everybody. My beautiful fiance taught everyone how to make pho. She's Vietnamese and she is a chef of sorts. We had a yoga instructor there, so we did some yoga up on the mountain between runs, which is essential, especially in your 30s. You felt, and then what else? We had a fitness trainer there too who was putting us through some workouts. So, in
Wow.
general, beautiful experience just to get people out into nature and to get people experiencing things. For teenagers, for example, like I can get more done I have two e-bikes that I'll take people on rides or whatever. And the kids love the e-bikes, it
Mhm.
goes about 25 or whatever. And you can just see their entire mood just change. It's like, at what point in time are these kids? They're not sick, they're not anxious, they're not depressed. They're deprived of the human experience that is supposed to be adventurous, brother.
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then I guess lastly on your website, anyways, you talk about breath work and meditation. You've talked a little bit about that, but talk a little more about that as far as what you teach patients in regards to that.
Sure. So I was somebody you would never get to actually do that. Like I said, I was sort of a hard-nosed, rural Oklahoman, But in medical school, one of the first fMRI studies I had seen of the brain, it showed structural and functional brain changes with the application of meditation practices such as breathing or focused on just the breath or on around you. Also, when I worked at the VA, they did biofeedback on me. So I was in the chair. Had heart rate, they had blood pressures, they had peripheral oxygen, they had skin temperature, respiratory rate, all on a screen right in front of me. And I'm hanging out. I'm an athlete. My heart rate's like 44. They would say, talk about something that bothers you. So I'll talk about my brother's addiction. And I would just watch these levels. I'm talking climb, heart rate go to 102, breathing is erratic, temperature goes up a degree, and just geeking out, man, on just thoughts and emotions. And then this PhD psychologist would then talk me down and do guided breath work, and all the levels, just as steeply as they rose, they would fall. And I saw that happen. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing this to myself all the time. So that really got me bought into the physical practices of it. And then those brain scans showed me that I'm, creating a different brain by doing it, really got me to buy into it. And then getting people to obviously learning how to do that on my own and with my like ADHD brain to be a skilled master, how to slow myself down. And then just, showing, probably listen to thousands of videos on YouTube, look through all the literature and the research on it. And then finally just teaching people in session on how to even breathe appropriately and how to slow their mind down naturally without having to resort to some, outside of yourself things.
Yeah.
Use what you got before you start adding things that you that you don't need.
Man, that's so awesome that you do what you do. I mean, really everything you've been talking about, I just think, I mean, I'm a family practice doc, but I feel like that's what psychiatry should be,
Agreed.
It's, I mean, it couldn't be further from what it has become or what it is in the more conventional realm. But my gosh, that's what it really should be. How, patients are so used to, especially those that go to typically see a psychiatrist, they're just used to going and seeing pills or getting pills. And quick visits with their doctors. Like, how do they even come to find you? And then it seems like they're going to have to be a little bit open-minded, looking for something different when they do come to you. Like how do you get those patients in to see you and have them buy into what you're trying to do?
Well, so first things first, I learned this pretty early when I left, that medicine 2.0 is going to be, I don't care what certifications and degrees that you have, all your crazy tools. Can you help me? Can you help me? So it's all review based. So if I have a bunch of reviews that all back up what I'm saying here, because I trained underneath guys that went to Harvard, they went to Yale and did these things, but bedside manner, were they skilled in a room? Could they motivate a patient? Were they empathetic? Did they sit with them? Did they care? Did they drive great results? Right. So at that point in time, I was like, okay, well, let me be the person who does that. So first and foremost, I tout the people that I have served and I have helped. So the reviews are really what drive it. And then if you can go see someone, oh, this person had ADHD, fixed it. This person had PTSD, overcome. This person had anxiety or depression, and they were to burst out of that while it's coming off two medications at the same time. That generally gets me the buy-in. But most importantly, it's about solving you within you. So I definitely have had the issue of marketing and branding my particular approach. So I have to flip it because men, and who I work best with, and young athletes, for example, do performance and coaching on the side and things for fun. And so to get them to buy in, that's where I flip the script on them of, we are enhancing your brain health. Like, your cognitive function will improve. Your mood will improve. Your organizational skills will improve. Whether you are mentally ill or not, I don't care. That this process is still available to you to make your life better. And if your brain is even 5% better throughout the course of your life, that will make you $1 million. So getting people bought into that process is something I've had to become skilled at, but it
Yeah.
works. But
Wow.
in general, social medias I have up and going pretty well, and then my website is great. And building community and doing community level events are the next steps.
Sure. Very nice. So I know we talked a little bit about some of the biohacking, the sauna, the cold plunge, that type of thing. And sounds like you do all this yourself. So give us some favorites that you have for just you personally.
I mean, definitely that low dose ketamine protocol, I would say, as a number one. In that, we're getting those BDNF levels up. So that would come first and foremost, I would say, to get that neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. Also, that increased levels of BDNF lower neuroinflammation. So just the same way that your body and your nose get stuffy and puffy is the same thing that happens to your brain, right? You just can't see your brain. You can only experience it. So whenever the problem, and then also you can't really experience it because when it goes offline, it's the thing that experiences. So now more unconscious leads to more unconscious. You know what I mean? So that is generally the tool that we can use to get people thinking more logically and cleaner for just a brief duration. So that would probably be my lead point, but nothing to me is going to be better than the 5 pillars of health and wellness: sleep, exercise, nutrition, relationships, and spirituality. Supplements, all of psychedelics, all of this stuff, it's going to get you 5 to 10%, brother. It's going to, at maximum, it's going to get you 5 to 10%. I'm not going to tout this as though it's the holy grail. This is something that can be a benefit, but we must absolutely start with what is your reason to do any of this stuff? Because we can optimize dopamine just by thinking about it, right? The placebo effect is real. We can scan people's brains and see an outsurge of dopamine if they think that they're getting a pill that helps them. That is insane. That means your brain can do it by its own self. So I'm trying to teach people how they can do that from the inside out, first and foremost. So that always starts with purpose-driven work on what actually matters to you in this life. And then we can start adding some of this other stuff, such as low-dose ketamine. We talked briefly about peptides, even BPC 157. I've seen help greatly with people who have body pain that then causes some mental health related issues. And then also there seems to be an inflammation component going on there, which I suspect that it would be lowering neuroinflammation also. This is theoretical, of course, but it makes sense to me logically. Supplements, there's huge rabbit holes, but like I said, at the end of the day, you're gonna be taking handfuls of supplements. It's gonna cost you hundreds of dollars. There's nothing gonna be better than going out to the side of a mountain and doing a breathing exercise and stretching your body out with some good friends or something like that, or snowboarding.
Yeah, cool. Well, you also have a podcast. You call it the LIT, or Lifestyle Integrative Therapy Podcast. Talk about that a little bit. How long you've been doing that, and what kind of stuff do you talk about on the show?
Well, sure. So in general, I'm trying to find people who are, at the top of their respective fields, who are also living great lifestyles. Like, I don't care if you're great at what you do. If you have a sucky lifestyle and you're not happy, like that to me is the old school, where you look happy on the outside and then, you're not behind the scenes. I don't like that at all. I think I've lived that life before, and that's just not what I'm trying to deliver to people. So I'm looking for genuinely happy, healthy, athletic, fit people who are doing the things, but have a good way of going about it, and then picking their brains on how did they do that. I want to know what processes and practices and motivations led them to being able to do that. And then, of course, so that's like big people around Oklahoma City, entrepreneurs, somebody who's been through prison and then built a 6-7 figure business. Like, I want to know what was going on there. And then also other medical practitioners who are in the integrative or holistic health space, who have some new tools or strategies that people can use to live longer, happier, and healthier, without having to, spend a ridiculous amount of money on it.
Yeah. Well, very cool. To encourage people to check that out, the LIT podcast. Well, man, that's good stuff. I'm really glad I got connected with you, especially your local guy here, and love what you're doing. Really, really cool stuff. So, as we kind of wrap up here, well, first, let me tell people how to get a hold of you. So it's the litclinic.com. Is that correct? Is that the best way to just kind of find you? Mm-hmm. Okay. So as we wrap up, I always ask my guest if they could give us one health tip that would make us healthier today. What would you say to that?
So stress is going to be the root cause about 90 to 95% of disease. So anything that we can do to start mitigating or limiting the negative stress. So stress in itself is not bad for us. There's eustress and distress. There's good stress and bad stress, right? So I would very much figure out in your life, what are the good stressors, the ones that inspire you to go upwards. Choose those. You're going to have stress either way. Choose the good ones. And the ones that aren't serving you and just pulling you down, I would get rid of those as quickly as possible, because that's a very quick path to a not pleasant future. Yeah.
Very nice. We could almost have a whole nother podcast probably on just stress. So,
big facts.
And getting rid of that, but very nice. So, Dr. Benjamen Morrell, just really cool stuff. And so encourage everybody to check out his website and podcast. So appreciate your time and appreciate everyone listening. And we will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to FitRx. I invite you to share this with friends and family. If you would like to contact me, you can visit our website at fitrxwellnessok.com, or you can email me at drgreg@fitrxwellnessok.com.